Hi, I'm Ellen, this is my channel, and this is an extremely small TBR and wrap up in one video, because since quarantine I haven't been reading anything. I'm gonna start with two books I've just finished. So I just finished reading John Dies at the End by David Wong. I didn't know how to feel about this book originally because I enjoyed reading about half of it, and past the 50% mark I started getting a little bit bored of it. David Wong tells the story of him and his best friend John, who discover this soy sauce drug that basically allows them to see monsters and things that are otherworldly and don't really exist. The drug in question, which he calls the soy sauce, is meant to kind of open up your brain to certain things it wouldn't be open to normally. So both on the side of you become way smarter and more capable with your brain. Like at some point they're talking to each other through a dog because of how the soy sauce has evolved them, and he's able to see into the future or see a bunch of different things happening all over the world and change one element of them in order to save someone else's life. It's kind of like that theory of you only use 10% of your brain, and if you were to use the rest you would have superpowers. It's obviously not true and has been disproven by science, but it's an interesting concept. And as they go and use the soy sauce, they're able to hunt monsters, kind of like paranormal ghost hunters type of people. I think at some point a meat monster attacks them. There's like a bunch of weird shit. It's really fun. It's like really nonsensical, unique voice type of writing. I can't really think of any other author who writes quite the same way. He uses a lot of like shock tactics in a way in his writing that I don't mind too much because I think they're innovative and unique and quite fun to read. However, the reason I wasn't too sure about the book is because after about 50% it started to be repetitive and it started to feel like he was using the same shock tactics, the same humor, the same thing over and over again, and the plot wasn't moving forward anymore. I didn't feel like the story was advancing. I wasn't too sure what the story was anymore at all, and it just felt really long, and if you start feeling like a book is long, then it's too long and it should have been cut off earlier. I did still enjoy the book overall though. I think the book stays with you, and I think that's why I would rate it a little bit higher than I originally did. I think I gave it 3.5 stars when I finished it. Although the second half of it bored me a little bit, the writing side, the voice of the book was so unique and so innovative, I found personally, that it stayed with me, inspired me to, I kind of wanted to write similar things afterwards. I just wish that I was in the middle of reading it when quarantine hit, because I stopped reading because then I stopped reading it. Especially as my commute disappeared and I lost about 2 hours and 40 minutes of reading time. Yes, that's how long back and forth I was traveling to work. The second book that I finished a few days ago is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I really like Lucy Foley as an author. I read The Hunting Party earlier last year and loved it. I've never read her other books because I don't think they're thrillers, and I really liked her as a thriller author. In The Guest List, you've got a bunch of people invited to a very fancy wedding on a remote island somewhere in Ireland. I loved the atmosphere. It was a very atmospheric book. I think she writes that really well, because in The Hunting Party you really felt like you were somewhere in the middle of Scotland, lost in a snowstorm, couldn't get home. And in The Guest List you really feel like you're on a very remote island somewhere in Ireland, with the sea being so temperamental and a storm brewing. I like the fact that in The Guest List, the point of views of the characters, some of them I would have normally disliked, but she wrote them well enough that I was really compelled by them and really liked them, despite their characteristics or personalities being dislikable on paper. So I love that about it. The story's basically revolving around two quite rich, fancy people getting married that don't actually know each other all that well, and you get the point of view of the bride to be you don't get the point of view of the groom, but you kind of get the sense that she's enthralled by him but doesn't know him as well as she wished she did. And then you have a bunch of other characters surrounding her and the best man of the groom as well, who are all invited at the wedding, and you get their point of views. What Lucy Foley does really well, and she did in The Hunting Party and she does it here again, is an acceleration of the pace. So she writes it in a way where you have a first prologue telling you we found a dead body, but then you don't know who it is. And then you go back in the past, here just one day earlier, to get the point of views of all the different characters, and you start wondering, every time you're in the head of someone, you're like, are you the victim? Are you the murderer? It leads to an interesting guessing game where you start thinking, well, you're kind of an awful person, you're probably going to be the one who dies. I overall really enjoyed this book. I love her writing style. It's so easy, fast-paced. You get that sense of, you get closer and closer to the present from the different point of views in the past. They slowly accelerate and you start feeling, okay, we're getting to that moment where the person is going to die, and she does that acceleration really well to bring you the climax. So I love that about her book. However, I'm not quite sure whether I had the same thing about The Hunting Party, but in the guest list, I was a little bit disappointed by the ending. It wasn't so much the twist. I think a couple of twists were predictable, a couple of them were not that predictable. I think the non-predictable ones bothered me a little bit because they were unrealistic in some ways. Like, it just felt like there's one character who a lot of people are linked to in different ways, and the ways everyone is linked to each other somehow felt a bit stretched. Like, she was really trying very hard to force a connection between certain people that I just thought, okay, that's not realistic, that's pushing it, that's a little bit too far. And I almost feel like it would have been better if she had left it alone and just decided, well, those characters aren't connected in the end, and the secret were revealed, that was it. There's no need for an extra twist where they're linked to this other person. I'm trying to explain as much as possible without giving spoilers. I hope I am not giving any spoilers. And the other part that was slightly disappointing about the ending was that it was really rushed. Like, it could have done with another 50 pages or so, with a little bit more of an epilogue, because in the epilogue you just have each character's point of views finishing on like 1 or 2 pages max, saying what's happening now that they've discovered the body and they've discovered who the killer is, or who they think the killer is, or if they don't. It kind of made me feel a little bit like the villain in the story got away with more than they should have. One of my issues was how you didn't really get much more of a sense of conclusion for some of the characters. For some of them it just felt disappointing and unfair and kind of like forced into a satisfying moment that wasn't. And then for some of them you just felt like there were so many conversations you wanted to be in for that you knew were going to happen after the end of the book, and I kind of was disappointed that we didn't get to see that. We didn't get those conversations between some of the characters. You didn't get the proper conclusion that you really wanted between some of them, and that just left me hungry for more. And because it is standalone, it's not part of a duology or trilogy at all, you're not gonna get that satisfaction, and that kind of bothered me. I still rated it quite high. I think I still rated it 4 stars because I still really liked the book. Read it fairly fast, it stayed with me, and I overall really enjoyed the reading experience regardless of the ending. The ending could have been better, but it didn't ruin the overall book, if that makes sense. So that's for the 2 books I have just finished. So the book I'm currently reading is These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling. I'm only 30 pages-ish in, but so far I'm really enjoying it. The book tells the story of Hannah, who is an elemental witch living in Salem. Elemental witches basically have powers over the elements. I think from what I understand of Hannah's powers, she's connected to fire. She lives in Salem, where they have all the history of witch trials and everything, but there's only a few witches there that are real witches and not just regs playing at being a witch. A reg in the book is a regular person, so a non-witch, someone who doesn't have real powers. witches are bound to secrecy and cannot absolutely talk about their powers or show them to anyone who is a reg. She has an ex-girlfriend, Veronica, who's this really hot witch, who's also going to the same school as she is. You learn pretty quickly that they've got a little bit of a past where they went to a trip in New York and something bad happened there involving a blood witch. A blood witch in the book is pretty much an evil witch who can control you with one drop of your blood. Hannah goes to a bonfire with her friends. She's got a little bit of a chat with Veronica, who as her ex tries to taunt her and tease her because Veronica still wants her back. Then during the bonfire they hear a scream and they go and check it out. There's like a dead raccoon there whose guts has been exposed, so it's kind of like sacrificial. And there's like a circle of fire on the ground in the shape of a tentacle. So Hannah starts freaking out and thinks it's the blood witch, and she thinks it's the one from New York. Veronica tells her that's not possible, definitely not, and she's panicking for nothing. So she reassures her and thinks it's just a prank by a reg. So they leave it alone, but the reason Veronica doesn't want Hannah to say anything is because if she says something to the council, aka their parents, they risk losing the powers or getting some sort of punishment. So they keep it quiet, and that's about it. That's all that's happened so far, which is actually quite a lot for 30 pages only. So I'm really excited to see what happens next. So far I'm liking the writing style, I'm liking the pace, and I'm hoping it's just going to continue to be just as good. So, but yeah, I'm excited to find out what happens next. So that's the book I'm currently reading. And next is 2 books that I plan on reading after. Perhaps I will change my mind because I am a mood reader and I don't always follow my TBR, and that's how I end up with a bunch of books taking the dust on my shelves. So this is just my plan, but my plan might change. 2 very, very different books that I'm quite excited to read next. One of them is Humble Pie, and it is a non-fiction book. It is a comedy of math errors, written by Matt Parker. It's basically a book that tells you about all sorts of math errors that have happened in history and have created chaos. It's about like 315 pages or so. What I like is they've put on purpose the wrong page numbers. So this is the beginning of it, and it says like page 300 and some, 313, which is going backwards. I don't really know what I'm expecting from it. I do enjoy sometimes reading about a topic that I have absolutely zero expertise in, as in I'm really bad at it, as in math. And I read like a couple of years back Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Had the same feeling of, oh wow, it's been vulgarized for people like me who were terrible at science and just want to know more without needing to learn a bunch of things that they don't understand. So I have a feeling this is kind of that vibe. It's for the masses, it's not for mathematicians or anything. So it's for me, so I'm excited to read that. Then the other book that I really want to read is The Babysitter's Coven by Kate Williams. From what I've read of the story, it's this girl who is in a babysitter's club. She thinks it's pretty lame, but she likes it. And another really hot girl tries to join desperately her group, her club, and she's wondering why, until she realizes the girl tells her she's got a note from her mom saying find the babysitters, and then they figure out together that it's because of their lineage and heritage as witches, from what I understand, and they're gonna have some weird evil to fight against. I don't know much more about it than that. It's a pretty simple premise and plot, but I quite like that kind of stories. It's giving me, you know, Sabrina and Buffy type of vibes, so that's all I'm asking for really in life. That's about it for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it, and if you like it, and if you want to stay for some more, please subscribe.